Hey gals, guys and everyone else, I'm Hayze, this is Armoured Brownies, and due to overwhelming fan demand, we're doing probably the highest requested mask since Kindred, which is of course Jhin from League of Legends. But I'm going to be doing it using a different set of materials than I've used in the past, because I want to practice with them, and this seemed a really good mask to practice with. So I'm about to start streaming. So let's just hand straight over to myself with the stream footage. Now you can see me approaching using this monster clay, as it is, which is an oil and wax based clay, which is a lot tougher than my water based clay. You can see me approaching this sculpt in the same way that I would with wet clay, just piling it on the face and then trying to carve out the shape of the object that I want. This is a decision I will later come to regret, because that's definitely not how you should use this sort of clay. However, as you saw in the opening, I'm also using a slow cooker, something that you would use to slow cook a stew to keep the clay warm. And you can see I'm taking my warm clay, putting it on the mask, and it immediately cools down and becomes very solid, which means I have a very solid clay to sculpt against, which allows for you to make some very sharp edges and very clean, crisp surfaces in a way that you can't with wet clay, the stuff I usually work with. It does also mean that I have to use rather sharp tools and a lot of force to get the details in that I want. For my usual anatomy stage, it takes quite a while to put down the basic amounts of shapes that I would usually expect. Now, if you're watching this and you enjoy this sculpt and you're a League of Legends fan, make sure you check out my old Kindred sculpt, where I've sculpted both lamb and wolf masks, and also check out the rest of my videos. But whilst you're here, drop a like on this video and also let me know what your favourite League of Legends champion is. Maybe we have some champions in common. My favourites, no joke, are Leona, Lulu and Lux. Complete coincidence they all begin with L. You can see we've made a lot of progress on the mask, but it has been slow going, as I did almost a week's worth of streaming just to get a very basic shape that I was then happy to start putting all of the detail work on top of, and then carving down the flat edges and all that. You might spot me using a pasta roller here as well. Another one of those really odd little things you can use with this material is you can put lumps of it through a pasta roller to get some nice flat consistent sheets. So you're putting down consistently even layers. And then, just like I would with water and water-based clay, I'm using a liquid to smoothen the surface of this clay. But this liquid just happens to be white spirits. It's a little bit fragrant, but it seems to dissolve the top layer of wax and oil well enough that I can then put in some extra fine details and smooth it out extra nicely. I also use a nice even layer of white spirits and go over it with a sponge to get a kind of porcelain effect in it, much like we did with Reaper, but with water. After that sculpting, we've now reached this point where we have a foundation that we're happy to start putting details in. As you can see, there are still flaws in it, but putting perfect symmetry into a sculpt gives you diminishing returns. So the more time you put in, the less you get back. But you can carry on putting time and still get smaller and smaller and smaller little returns. But at some point you just have to tell yourself to stop. And since this is a new material to me, getting to this quite simple shape has actually taken me about 10 hours of sculpting. It also doesn't help that the reference image that I'm using, the artist has gone for cool looking edges and geometry rather than physically possible types. So I'm having to adapt some of how it comes together. But now that we have the whole anatomy and surface all present and correct, we can start putting on the details. So let's go. And those details vary wildly between all the different reference images you see of Jhin. So I've kind of just gone for what I felt looked really good, but also matched the same sort of footprint as the reference image I'm using. And I do it in a very similar method that I would with my water-based clay, in that I gouge out the detail that I want with my little spoon tool, and then I go over it with a sponge and my white spirits to soften the edges of it, and then I go over it again with the spoon tool to re-dig it out of the clay. But also it gives some quite natural edges to it, so it doesn't look very forced, and you can do that again and again and again until you have your nice natural looking porcelain details in the mask. And then one more pass with a sponge and all the fluid to maintain that detail in. And eventually, after 11 hours of sculpting, this is what we finally managed to create. I'm incredibly happy with this guy, but he took a lot longer than I would have liked, because I approached using monster clay as I would any other water-based clay, but it's much more resistant than wet clay will ever be. I'm used to building up the entire area I want to be sculpted and then carving the object out of the clay. Whereas this, I think you want to slowly build it up over time. Be able to smooth it down afterwards using scraping tools, flat kidney shaped things, and also chemicals, because chemicals are magic. For this clay, I used a fair bit of white spirits to soften the surface of the clay up in the same way that you would use water to soften the surface of water-based clay. And I hope you'll agree with me that it's come out really nicely. Thank you to everybody who suggested, Jhin, who is enthusiastic about these sculpts and wants to see more. Let me know what you'd like to see me do next. Make sure to like this video, leave me a comment below, subscribe to the channel, and also check me out on Twitch and Facebook. We have a thriving community in both.